Well, let's explore this relationship together as through our computer we allow the computer to take us deeply into this model. There's our Mandelbrot set, and you can see that we are zooming into a complete portion, very specific portion of this set, and notice all along the periphery, all along the edges of the pattern, you see many, many, many Mandelbrot sets. As you listen to the music from this, it's almost a meditation as we move into this powerful pattern, the model that represents our consciousness. You see all the little Mandelbrot sets lining up side by side. Any change in any one of those sets would be reflected throughout the entire pattern, throughout the whole. There's something very interesting that will happen as we move farther and farther, deeper and deeper into the innermost regions of this pattern. And we see the pattern repeat itself over and over again. We're moving to an end point. As we reach this end point, what you'll see is that we end up with precisely the same pattern that we began with. Your relationships work in this manner. Your life works in this manner. The patterns are with you no matter where you go, no matter how far deeply into your life you move, or how far you attempt to remove yourself from the patterns of life. You are holographic in nature. No matter where you move to, what part of the world, what part of the country, no matter how many relationships you move into or out of, how many friendships you choose to initiate or complete, the patterns of your life remain the same because they are holographic in nature. And now you see, as we approach the end of the lifetime of this mathematical equation, this mathematical model, what we are completing with is precisely the same thing that we began with, the Mandelbrot set. No matter how deeply into this pattern we would move, if we were to begin once again now to look deeply into this pattern, we would see precisely the same thing happening again. We would see precisely these little Mandelbrot sets, one after another, again and again, reflecting in each of them, respectively, the pattern of the whole.
Most Americans would agree that it would be prudent to have a plan to provide for the continuity of government and the rule of law in case of a devastating terrorist attack or natural disaster. A plan that provides for the cooperation, the coordination, and continued functioning of all three branches of the government. The Bush administration tells us they have such a plan. They introduced a little sketchy public version that's clearly inadequate and doesn't really tell us what they have in mind. But they said, don't worry, there's a detailed classified version. But now they've denied the entire Homeland Security Committee of the United States House of Representatives access to their so-called detailed plan to provide for continuity of government. They say, trust us. Trust us, the people who brought us Katrina, to be competent in face of a disaster. Trust us, the people who brought us warrantless wiretapping and other excesses eroding our civil liberties. Trust us. Maybe the plan just really doesn't exist, and that's why they won't show it to us. I don't know. Or maybe there's something there that's outrageous. The American people need their elected representatives to review this plan for the continuity of government.
Gentleman's time has expired.
The Bush administration is pushing and pushing hard. A partnership between the United States and Mexico and Canada with a goal of what it calls integration by 2010. This partnership among three nations is being discussed at the highest levels of the three governments at the urging of the largest multinational corporations. But it is barreling ahead with absolutely no congressional oversight, no voter approval, out of sight completely of the American people, and as far as we can determine, without any constitutional authority whatsoever.
It seemed like some mornings it was just crisscrossing the whole sky. It was just like a giant checkerboard.
Bill Nichols snapped several photos of the strange clouds from his home in Stamps, Arkansas. They begin as normal contrails from a jet engine, but do not fade away like a normal contrail. Soon after, he saw particles in the air. KSLA News 12 had the sample tested at a lab. The results? A high level of barium, 6.8 parts per million, more than 3 times the toxic level set by the EPA.
Vaccines are required if you're headed to war, but Target 5 discovered that a frightening number of U.S. servicemen and women are having severe reactions, including a young Marine from Claremont County.
It's difficult right now.
At a time when young men and women are dying on the battlefield.
We live in a very volatile time in the military.
There is an enemy here at home.
And no one wants to look bad.
It's not a shot from a gun.
This is the worst cover-up in the history of the military.
But a shot from a syringe that's leaving some U.S. servicemen and women on the brink of death.
Until 9/11, I was unaware of any protected steel structure that had collapsed anywhere in the world.
The collapses of the Twin Towers and Building Number 7 had to have been examples of controlled demolition, brought about by thousands of explosives placed throughout each of the buildings.
September 11th, men armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. The fanatics who terrorist killers, September 11th, terrorist of Al-Qaeda, terrorist Taliban, nuclear weapons, terrorist, 9/11 terror.
Barbaric terrorists, terrorists for terrorism, September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger, September 11th, September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, the horror, terrorism, terrorists. Terrorists, 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 the terrorists. Terrorists, terrorist terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism, 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 terrorist. September 11th. Threat of global terrorism, terrorism, terrorist, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. September 11, 2001, global terrorism. Terrorist, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorist, September 11th, terror.
September 11th, terrorism, September 11th. Terrorism, terrorists, September 11th.
Terror, September 11th. Threat, tyranny, terrorist, tyranny, tyranny. People hate us. Terror.
Terrorism, September the 11th. Terror, terrorist, terror, terrorist, terror. Weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th. September the 11th. Terrorists, terrorists. The evil terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists know.
The terrorists know.
People write about, oh, the slave camps. That there's all these slave camps in the U.S. And they're going to herd everybody into the concentration camp and electromagnetic mind control on it. Look. You're not going to, and even if they say, oh, well, they're going to bring in the United Nations troops because it's not going to be American cops that are going to do it. Look, if you're reading this stuff and you're worrying about this stuff, you are worshiping the Illuminati. That is worship. You are paying fealty with fear.
There's a lot of people are experiencing a lot more synchronicities, a lot more telepathic events, even kind of manifestation. Stuff that movies like The Secret and What to Believe talk about. It's a sense that almost the psychic and the physical are not as separate as they once were. That boundary is becoming more and more kind of permeable. So that's also magnifying our kind of intention. So if you have kind of negative stuff, project in you, that just gets projected out in more and more powerful forms. So in a way, we're really seeing. I think that's, we could talk about the apocalypse, really meaning like uncovering or revealing. So it's a time when, all the sort of hidden aspects of the human psyche get kind of poured out in front of us.
If today happened to be the last day you're ever going to be on the planet, would you want to be spending that day in fear and in worry and in terror?
Things are going to radically change, and it's going to start just like this. But what's basically happening is you've got a planet that is vibrating at a frequency of fear and anger. You've got this new frequency called the 12th density, which is lifting everything up. Well, these really dense energies cannot move up.
Human beings always have to transform themselves into something completely new in order to survive.